Okay, it is 5 o'clock. We are going to start. Thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to call to order this committee of the whole. It's February 17th and it is 5 o'clock. The town of Smithers acknowledges the Gidim Den clan and the Wet'suwet'en people on whose unceded traditional territory we live, work, and play. And there is no one in the gallery, so I'll skip the webcasting notice. And council, we have an agenda. Motion to approve, please. Councillor Bucama. Anything to add? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay. The purpose of this meeting is to try to loop us in to one kind of think on advocacy moving forward. So thanks to staff for pulling us together. And the first report is from Ms. McKinley on NCLGA. But as we go through this, we'll kind of want to think about the whole year, what we might consider as the issues of primary concern, some of which could be addressed through the resolutions process at NCLGA. Some could move from there to UBCM, and others we might want to just keep on the edge of our desk that we want to advocate for in different ways as opportunity comes about. So it seems a bit mushy in my thinking, but let's start with the report from Ms. McKinley and see how we do. So I'm going to suggest, and we'll see, sometimes this doesn't work when I do this, is that we think about the subjects that are there, see if we like them, and you may have things on the side of your desk that you wanted to add to this. So I'm going to just kind of cast it open at this point. If anyone among you has issues that you want to raise, or Mr. Schroeder wants to talk.
Thank you very much, Mayor Altschul. Perhaps a few opening comments from staff just to support some of tonight's, council's discussion tonight from an administrative perspective. So first and foremost, what we've done here today is brought 3 suites of reports that deal with 3 separate levels of advocacy. The first level, obviously, being that NCLGA UBCM resolution, which is more at the provincial level and encouraging the provincial government to take certain steps. The second being the UBCM minister meetings. So those matters that specifically affect the town of Smithers that we're looking to advocate for our community on behalf of. And then finally, some more opportunities at a more fluid level. So perhaps at conferences, events, conventions, other events that mayor and council may want to have some type of advocacy and engagement on, but acknowledging that all of council may not be able to attend all of those different events. So simply trying to have some specific and focused targeted advocacy prepared for those types of meetings as well. I will also note that should council wish to move in camera to discuss any items, please feel welcome to raise those, and we can certainly do so, understanding that some of that information may be confidential. And if there's curiosity about simply wanting to discuss whether an item should be moved in camera, we've also prepared motions for those as well. So please just give us a heads up, and we'll happily get that coordinated for us.
Thanks, Mr. Schroeder. Just in the framing of that, it might be wise just to have those questions first. I have a couple that might just relate to items that ought to be in camera, but I'm not sure how the rest of council is feeling. If you have any of those items as well that you want to discuss, whether they are closed items. Okay, then maybe just to test my own thinking, why don't we just start there? If that works, Mr. Schroeder, if you have the motion so that we're able to ask those questions, and then hopefully we're able to just have the rest in open. So I'm going to move that pursuant to section 90 and 92 of the community charter, this committee of the whole meeting be closed to the public to permit discussions concerning one item under section 91N, the consideration of whether a council meeting should be closed under a provision of this subsection or subsection 2. We don't need a seconder, so all in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried. So we'll just wait 1 second for the live stream. Okay, yeah, so probably will be closed for about 15 minutes, just for the benefit of those who may be watching. Okay, that was a little faster than it could have been. So that's great. Thanks, council. So we are recalled back into the committee meeting at 5:08. Alrighty. So we have all of the subjects that were put in the report from Ms. McKinley, 2 reports. Council, does anyone want to start on advocacy issues or want me to ramble on and see where we go? Okay. I'm going to ramble and I'll look for hands or hymns. So maybe just by way of a general comment, there are some things that I've seen in the resolutions, particularly the NCLJ resolutions in the first package that were endorsed by NCLJ and were further endorsed by UBCM. So unless there's one of those that we really want to try to tackle a different way, I'm wondering about the rationale of just continually trying to drum on the same drum through the same way. So it's not that the issues aren't important, and perhaps if I focused on library funding, since that had a lot of had a lot of support up to UBCM level, and then we heard clearly from the provincial government through the premier, until there was new funding sources, there would not be new funding for libraries. So we can talk about it. It's still needed, not only here, but across British Columbia. And yet I feel like we were told something. So all these resolutions have gone through all the way. They've been endorsed by UBCM. So that might be one for this year that I would consider setting aside. So thoughts? Okay. So I'm going to just extrapolate that over all of the resolutions that have made it through UBC or NCLGA and UBCM, unless I hear differently. Okay.
Yeah, I like the 5-1 West. I think it's still all those still, I think, are very crucial issues. I would probably have library funding at the top of my list. Yeah.
And then maybe Councillor Buchanan just say a bit more, because I think now we need to decide if we're going to try to do them again. So I was just suggesting we leave them as they've all been endorsed.
Okay.
Are there some though that you want to raise out of that? I do agree with you. The issues remain important.
Yeah.
I'm just not quite sure how to tackle them.
Yeah. No. Like you said, they've all been endorsed. For me, I'd love to see the library one go again to the province, but.
Okay, well, I'm just going to make note of it. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I had sort of thought about the issues that we'd brought forward again and again, but perhaps nothing really came of it. So the only ones that I had highlighted that I would, for me, like to see move forward would be NCLGA reference number R14. So that's on page 9 of 68. And again, I just think, to your point, unless there was something specific that we were asking for. So for example, to Councillor Buchanan's point about the library funding support, I would just get really specific on what it is that we're asking for. So perhaps it's something like looking at what the library has asked for additional supports for staff due to increased need for security. If we were really specific, I think that would be a great idea, just so that they can see that even in rural communities, there's a necessity to have an additional body due to some of the challenges we see around just social supports that are needed at libraries. And then specific to land use as another example, if there was a specific piece of property that we were looking for, I just think we know that we've been told if we're really specific in our ask, we're likely to be more successful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to try to get a bit of clarity. I'm going back to the library one, Councillor Patterson. So you teased out additional funding for libraries, referencing their needs for extra staff due to, so for us, it's really clear that we have an encampment adjacent. And are you thinking about that as something that may be the same across communities in the region and the province, that they're all needing this sort of support?
Correct, Your Worship. And I would just say that's just from very informal conversations through some of the conferences that I went to over the past year, where the focus was on community safety and wellness, hearing from other communities that also saw an increase in support services needed at their local libraries due to supports for vulnerable populations, and then also to protect their patrons and their staff as well.
Okay. So one thing we might want to do, and I'm kind of looking toward Ms. McKinley, would be to sort of beef that out a little bit, might be by reaching out to a few of the other communities, at least in the northern region, to see if we've got something that would work first for NCLGA. And then if possible, maybe to the other area associations to see if it's common. You know, if I think about what we're being asked to do through the resolutions, it's to find things, if we're going the resolution way, that we're finding things that are common or close enough to common throughout our region. And then they might have a chance of making it through the UBCM resolution series. And if it doesn't meet that threshold, then it's something that we could park and take ourselves. But this might be one. So then Ms. McKinley or Mr. Schroeder, is that the type of support we could ask you for to do a little bit of that outreach for us, Mr. Schroeder?
Thank you, Mayor. It certainly is. We're more than happy to take this almost hypothesis away and sort of test it against some other communities, see what information we hear back from them, and then put together a draft resolution if we hear there's some general support for this. And perhaps as just a consideration, instead of specifically library, it may be best to acknowledge a broader catchment of services that are being relied on that are supported through local governments. I can't think of, specifics, but if we reach out to other local governments and we hear a consistent theme of local government services being relied on to support vulnerable populations, perhaps that could become a broader way to present that issue.
Okay, I'm seeing nodding there from Councillor Patterson. I tend to agree with her, though, that there probably is more pressure on public libraries because of the nature, but it would be good for us to know if there's another cohort of community services that are being impacted that way. So is that enough? Or Ms. McKinley, do you want a motion, or are you gathering our thoughts as we go? Okay. Councillor Bucama.
Yeah, like when it comes to libraries too, I just think the issue is that the province hasn't increased funding to libraries for years and years and years. And really, the operation of our library is totally dependent on town funding and regional district funding. The amount we get from the province hardly pays the bills at all. And I think communities all over BC are feeling that way.
Councillor Raven, then I'll go back over here. Councillor Raven.
So while I completely support our library, I do notice that there is also the letter that was dated January 13th that Mayor Attrell sent as president of NCLGA that covered those capital costs. So I mean, we might get a response to that. I like the idea of taking kind of a new crack at it and having a bit more focus for specific funding for what Councillor Patterson had suggested. Just because I do feel like I believe every UBCM and NCLGA that I've been to, there's always been about like the regular funding for libraries. So again, not that it's not needed. I just don't know if we need to take our staff time to come up with a resolution and just, beat a dead horse again. So, but I do like coming at it with a new slant.
Thanks, Councillor Raven. Councillor Patterson, Councillor Bucama, your mic's still on.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to the conversation that we're having around sort of, for lack of better characterization, funding inequities or expansion of scope in a mandate of municipalities due to provincial mandates. Something that I would be interested to hear from folks about is, do we feel it appropriate to continue to ask for ongoing Regional Benefit Alliance funding if we felt this would be the appropriate time?
Yes and yes, absolutely. So, was the one I had in big bold letters to add to the list. It's like, yipper. Okay. Okay. So just, I want to make sure that we're content as we move away from the library issue. We've defined a kind of a new tactic, a new specific area of concern that will help keep the library issue alive. So we're gonna move on from that one. Councillor Patterson, I think you said something else about land and I missed it. Was that you?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just if there was a specific area perhaps that the municipality might identify, so for example, if we think about planning for the next 10, 20, 30 years, do we have a specific idea of where we want to go? I think if we had parcels identified, perhaps we might be more successful. But I just can't recall when I think about our strategic priorities where we are in having those types of conversations. So perhaps this is maybe something for the next incoming council, but just was rationalizing why I didn't put it on my list, just because I couldn't think of a specific piece that we were interested in at this time.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces to that, and we can talk about just general, the need for increased land within the community. I think that's one piece. And otherwise, I do think it's probably to the next council if we want to consider, the impacts of regional growth. What are the opportunities? How will Smithers absorb hopefully more people, more businesses? What are those opportunities? I think in light of where we're sitting now and the review of strategic priorities we did in the last few weeks, that probably that bigger question needs to kind of sit there for the next council. I think the specific need to keep moving on the attempt to acquire additional lands that are contained within the town of Smithers, that is something that I think we can continue to do. One through advocacy, which we're talking about now, and the other will be when we get back to the strategic land inventory when that comes back before us. So if we want to talk about land, then we could do that now since it's on the table. What is the sense of council on whether or not we want to just to continue to push the province to assist us with making sure the lands that are available within the community move along as quickly as possible? Councillor Elliott.
How specific can we get in discussing this part? I know that maybe it's not the time to say, hey, I like this. Because we have had discussions in the past about certain places, but
Sorry, I think, and I see Mr. Shorter's hand, but I think if we're generally talking about lands that are currently identified as held by the Crown, we can generally talk about those. If you want to talk about anything for specific purpose, then I would suggest not. Mr. Shorter, that's correct?
Yes, absolutely, Mayor Attrell. Perhaps just as a bit of a prompt, I think if we're talking specific parcels or plots, that's when we should look to have a closed discussion. However, if we are talking more about the general topic of land transfers and more trying to influence the policy of the provincial government by asking them to increase the rate or speed up the process or whatever it may be, then that would be a bigger topic that could be presented in a NCLGA resolution.
Councillor Elliott.
yeah, so I won't get specific then. I think pursuing any Crown land within the town boundary of Smithers or located in there, to me, would be ideal. Hopefully there's not a lot of cost involved with that transfer rather than buying land in various places around Smithers. But to me, I think one of the most important things on these lists is that very thing. If we want to continue to give back land to the province to build stuff for services for our community, then we need to have it in the first place. And then we're going to have housing needs down the road as well. So I think pursuing the Crown land within the boundary of Smithers is very important. High on my list anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Elliott. And it was in our, general request last year to Ministry of Waterland, etc. So we could hold that one as perhaps a review and maybe updating it by what we know at the time that the UBCM I can't think, the UBCM resolutions have to be written, so we could just star that one or asterisk that one for now. And just if you weren't looking, Ms. McKinley's nodding her head. So I'm going to go to Councillor Raven and then Councillor Buchanan.
So again, I'm not opposed to the acquisition of Crown land. I think it's actually quite beneficial. I'm wondering for the NCLGA lens to make it more regional. I liked the resolution that we did last year, but I'm wondering if there's a way that perhaps in the be it resolved part is trying to tie it in where when the province wants to do things like with BC Housing or with childcare or any of those like provincially downloaded programs, where they should actually first look to Crown land within municipalities before talking to the municipality. So maybe trying to get that bit of a checkbox portion in, because I see where one of the issues would be is they have the funding. By the time they would transfer the Crown land to the municipality, we know how all of that kind of takes time. So I'm just wondering if maybe if there's a way we could work the resolution into being where the province should have to do it, an internal inventory and kind of step up with viable options, depending on what they're trying to do with the municipality. I apologize if that makes no sense.
Well, I think it makes sense to us. The gift we could probably give to Ms. McKinley is to make it as clear as possible. But so I'm going to take a kick at it and you tell me if this isn't right. So the idea would be that we create a resolution, perhaps again by looking out to some of the other communities to see if when programs or projects that are supported by the province, for example, housing projects, as they're going through the review process, that if land is required, that the entity look first to land that is owned or controlled by the province and perhaps solve the problem before it comes to us seeking land that we either have to acquire or surrender, sometimes acquire and then surrender. Is that the gist of it?
I love that you made my rambling make sense. That sounds perfect.
Ms. McKinley, did that make sense to you? She's giving me a sort of.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I believe last year, maybe David, you can recall this. Did we talk about this in our resolutions last year, or was it just a minister request? Is this one we wanted to be a resolution rather than a minister request, or both?
It may end up being both, but I think, go ahead, Mr. Schroeder.
Thank you. Last year, this was only a minister meeting topic and not a NCLJ resolution.
And I think, if I'm following Councillor Raven on this, it's the type of thing where if there is commonality throughout NCLGA, then there may be commonality throughout British Columbia, and this might be a problem that others are facing where we could look for a central solution. Just that, we've seen it not only with housing, but with childcare, and because we're tight for land, we may feel it more than some, but we're not the only community that is challenged this way. And was it on this, Councillor Buchanan, that you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to say what Mr. Schroeder just said, like, I figured provincial land transfers was a UBCM topic, not a NCLGA topic.
Thanks, Councillor Buchanan. I think it's not that NCLJ makes the decision, it's just that we gather steam as we go through there. And then it may be if the same resolution comes from other area associations to UBCM, it gathers a bit more steam at that table. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. And then not to derail from I like the steam analogy, the steam at the regional and provincial level. Just a couple of specific questions for staff on our particular municipality. Do we have a status on, or maybe I'll just keep it general. If at any point staff felt that our specific application in anticipation of UBCM needed advocacy, I would assume that staff would let us know. And the second piece, my question would be around our lands inventory discussion. Would we have the opportunity to have that conversation and potentially advocate this coming year if there were specific additional lands, or are we sort of suggesting that that's a pretty big undertaking in a significantly small period of time?
I'm just going to answer first. I'll go to Mr. Schroeder. It's my understanding we will see the land inventory soon, and then we may do with that as we will. I think that would be separate from the general the notion that Councillor Raven put on the table is that the province, where possible, solve its own land issues before asking us for something. So I think there's some things that by the time we get to the end of this evening, we might see things in multiple buckets. That we have this resolution perhaps being created for NCLJ. If endorsed there, it will go to UBCM. At the same time, we're clarifying an issue where we could say that if at any time we have the opportunity to raise this with a minister or an agency, go ahead. So I think we're going to have the 3 buckets by the time we're done this. So we'll have the buckets a bit messy tonight, and then we'll clarify them when it comes back to us in a couple of weeks. Is that reasonable? Anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just very briefly, the strategic lands inventory includes a broader set of lands than just the provincial crown lands. So they could be, held by individuals, commercial entities. So that's sort of a bit of a bigger discussion than simply the crown land transfer. And that was the only comment, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. So we got land, unless there's something that you need to deal with and close later. Another subject, do you have other ones? Councillor Raven?
This would be a new topic, I believe, for NCLGA. It would fall under the childcare bucket. I'm just thinking back to when we had our application and talking to multiple other municipalities. It seems like it's harder for northern and rural places to access funding. So I'm wondering if there's an appetite around the table to do a resolution where it recognizes higher construction costs and operating costs, and looking for proportional access to new childcare spaces and funding province-wide. Just trying to think, as it seems like a lot of things get concentrated in urban centers, and just trying to even that out a bit, but also acknowledge that, everyone needs access, but maybe having that proportional access, so it's not just concentrated in higher population centers.
Okay, as is becoming my habit tonight, I'm going to repeat that and see if we're on the same wavelength. So you specifically referenced childcare and asking the province to consider or to recognize the increased construction costs in some northern and perhaps other parts of BC. And I'm just wondering if maybe we ought to expand that to beyond childcare. So, we were seeing that with the not-for-profit housing project that was before council last week, where, the costs that they were feeling were high. And so the project was at risk. So council made the decision it made. But so that was really just an example to say perhaps that same constraint affects projects, not just childcare, that when programs are created and there's some sort of a scoring for costs, construction costs, that perhaps there's some consideration given to those projects where they're in parts of the province where construction costs are just going to be higher. And I don't know how to describe that, because we're thinking, of course, about our community, but is it northern, is it rural, is it remote, or is it places in the province who might at any time be experiencing some kind of a rush that puts a demand on their construction trades? So Northwest BC is going to see that if everything stays on the rails the way they are now. So that's the only kind of thought I have for you, is do we want to think about making it broader than childcare? And of course, I can only think of housing right now, but there's probably other potential programs. Councillor Raven?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm down for that. I was just trying to think, trying to figure out a way to have like a geographical kind of formula. So it's not like whether it's the Kootenays or the Caribou or wherever, but just really seeing that the provincial funding is kind of spread out, or a formula it takes into account the fact that it is definitely higher costs for construction of housing, construction of childcare, and even the operation of those places. So but yeah, that's just kind of, I noticed with so many programs is there's always a concentration in the urban center. So just really trying to get that lens and beat that drum just for everybody kind of, outside. We're talking to a lot of other municipalities. They've run into the same issues we have, where they get told like you have a great application, but the costs were too high.
How's that all landing with you there, Ms. McKinley?
It's fine. I will just research the items that are on the list and then bring them back.
Okay, so what was occurring to you when Councillor Raven was talking the last time, it would be, for provincial projects, looking for some specific consideration for increased construction costs in rural or remote areas or in areas, the word I used with dearth, I think it's the right word, a dearth of construction trades as a result of things going on, things, it's a very technical term, but, increased activity. So happy to chat with you about that later when you're trying to put this together, if that seems to be the gist of what we're talking about. Okay. So I think that, like the last one, could form the backbone of an NCLGA resolution that probably could work its way through UBCM and might sit in a bucket for advocacy as well, depending on projects as they come forward. It does make me think of one that we didn't get very far with last year, and it was that it was the costs that were described by the Smithers and Area Housing Society, and that not when you submit an application to the province, you actually have to do all of the work in advance, the environmental research, like all that stuff. That I might be getting the numbers wrong, but they could add something like $150,000 to the application process before if you have money. So that was one we tried last year. I don't know if we want to rejig that one, but Councillor Buikema.
Thanks, Mayor Attrell. Yeah, I would support Councillor Raven's idea, because my sense too was we were unsuccessful last time around because the construction costs were too high. So I'm all for that.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty. Let's move on. What else we got? I've lost somehow my little check sheet. It's very careless. Councillor Buikema, go ahead. Yep, wherever you like.
I don't mind starting us off if I would be happy to see all of these topics brought up again in our minister meetings, except my sense from some of the reading I did in preparation for this meeting was we do have a fully staffed Crown Council in Smithers right now, so that one maybe has to go. But I think the others are all still very legitimate requests.
Thanks, Councillor Buikema. Perhaps just to Crown, and I think the letter was in here, but we may want to keep an eye on that, in that the effectiveness of any particular Crown Council office will rely on the staff and the workload of those staff, because there is a model, and I'm not expert here, but there is a model that utilizes the Crown Councils wherever they are in the province to assist with cases, perhaps not local. So it doesn't mean that everyone who is in Smithers works only on Smithers court cases, or that people away don't also work on Smithers court cases. So it's keeping an eye on the total capacity of this, our local Crown Council office to be able to support the workload. So I'm happy at the time of the writing of the letter that we were fully staffed, but we want to make sure that the actual workings of the office are suiting the caseload there. So that wasn't terribly articulate, but I'm not sure if I want to, that might be one that we want to just keep. I don't know. I was going to say keep on the sideline, but it is actually one. Last year we saw that threshold of communities bringing forward advocacy for the Crown Council offices, and I think it was effective. So I don't know exactly what I think. Like, it feels like, okay, we made some headway, but staffing is a difficult thing to maintain all the time. And so much relies on that office, not just ours, but all the offices being really well staffed, because one can imagine it as a provincial resource. If there's a real, a gap in another office, there's no reason why I would do it too. If they were all my staff, how you'd start shifting resources to try to support the whole. So that was a very long-winded way of saying, I think it's really good, but I think we should keep our eye on it. So that may just mean staying in touch with the Society of Crown Councils and being ready to pick that up, whether it's just our actual council advocacy through direct ministerial outreach. So I don't know. Happy to leave it off the list for now, but not let it go too far away. Councillor Raven.
I don't know if we have a keep warm list, but just something, yeah, because I like the intent of it and keeping it, yeah, kind of on the back burner. It's one I don't think we need to rejig, but it's definitely worth having the conversation just prior to having to send in our minister requests and just see where we're sitting at. So I don't know, have a keep warm list. There, I'm sure there's a way better term for that, but
Yeah, and I think it's sort of described in, Mr. Dewar's report about having this year-round coordinated approach so that, we have a plan toward NCLGA and UBCM, and then being ready to respond when opportunity arises if we have, a happenstance meeting with the right staff or the right minister, remember to bring up these topics. So we're getting there to the coordinated approach. So this may just lie in that when we get to the discussion under 5.3. Okay, so the ones were on page 16 of 68 then, which was the roundup from last year. I guess again, just in recognition of what we've not been successful at for years now, and that's actually making any inroads into the recycling services. And the Youth Foundry, we had the letter regarding Youth Foundry. So, I mean, I guess I'm trying to find a way to say, are there some where we just let the ball rest this year and suggest that these are important ones for the next council to pick up? Or do we want to just keep, they're all important. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just looking at the table summarized on page 16 of 68. If it pleases Your Worship, is it okay if I just go through the list of ones that I wanted to, is that okay? And then apologies, Your Worship, I did have one that I would like to go back at the end, if I may, just for NCLGA. So topics that I would like to see move forward would be the expedition of the redevelopment of the Bulkley Valley District Hospital, the ambient level of arsenic and the impacts on construction and development, the funding for a Youth Foundry facility in Smithers. I would actually like to see at the recommendation of staff who might be aware of what supports exist in communities or what is needed further for northern communities. So putting children first at the center. I think that's incredibly important given the tragedy that happened in Tumber Ridge. And the second piece would be around the complex care supports. I'm struggling with this one because I'll have to be honest, from the presentation that we've had from experts thus far and then BC Housing, I'm struggling on whether or not complex care supports are the answer, or if we need to get specific about having a detox and rehabilitation facility either closer to Smithers or somewhere in the northern region. So I'm struggling if we want to make that specific to Smithers or North area. But I'm not clear when we talk about complex care supports and what we have and what I see in our community and what's missing would be the specific detox and rehabilitation. So not shipping people to Prince George where they just end up back on the street and then back in our community. And the last one would be the provincially funded RCMP officers. And I'll hold for the last one I have specific to Northern after. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, let's just do them then. We're all on that page. We'll go to 16 of 68. BVDH. Okay.
Yes.
We'll keep it there. The impacts of arsenic. I'm going to skip over recycling for now. Let's talk about additional complex care. Maybe some nuance there, but are we going to talk about that one? Sure, I'm glancing for whatever sort of positive reinforcement I get. I'm gonna keep it there. We can talk about it, but let's just keep it there for now. Youth Foundry. Okay, we're gonna keep it. And land, we've already talked about. Okay, and then Councillor Patterson added need for RCMP. So we'll keep that there for now. Okay, so maybe because we don't really want to just recirculate the things that didn't work before. So I'm just at the BVDH here. I only want to do one page. Let's just do this page for now. Sure, because these are the ones that Counselor Patterson mentioned. So yeah, thanks for that. I do see the rest of them now. I had only made notes on this page too. So maybe we don't have to belabor it, but BVDH, I agree, it's desperately needed. And maybe we should just review what we've said before, confirm with Northwest Regional Hospital District how it sits there, and then create the ask going forward. This one, the route of travel here would be, I think, direct to the health ministry, because this isn't a resolution for NCLGA or for UBCM. So this is advocacy to the ministries. Okay, you're good? Okay. So I think we'll just leave that one for now. Ms. McKinley gave me a nod, so we're going on. Impacts of arsenic. This is one as well that I think we can rely on staff to give us the latest information in creation of. This one actually could potentially be a resolution. It's not just Smithers. This is a provincial regulation. Sorry, I'm thinking as I pause. Probably it's in, as I think right now, it's in our best interest right now, I think, to direct advocate for Smithers in this one. We need to deal with it for ourselves. I think there is a provincial lens here, but it's probably best for us to keep this one as a direct advocacy and keep pushing this one along. Okay, Ms. McKinley, you're good? Okay. Just in order there, so additional complex care. So Councillor Patterson said a few things. I think there's a couple of ways to think about this. You know, when we started, it was about getting a complex care facility. I think what we've heard over the last few years is there have been additional resources that have been embedded in the community. And we have a reasonable expectation that that will continue to happen, continue to increase, barring some change of plans. So I think right now, I personally am feeling like advocating for increased resources in the community is probably more likely to have a positive end than suggesting we need a facility, which is where, when I started, that's really what I was thinking about, because every additional specialist matters. And then Councillor Patterson, you talked as well about perhaps needing detox or something in the northern region. I'm sure you're aware there is the provincial commitment to create the treatment center. That might not be the right language in Prince George. I don't disagree that that's pretty far for people here, but I'm not sure how to turn that in lieu of where the province is sitting right now. So I think I'm more inclined right now to lobby for increased services and resources in the community than to try to get an additional facility in the community. So the province has added some treatment beds to the Terrace region, is going to add the facility at Prince George. And my guess that might be like that. We might be wise to hold on that for this year and just try to get all the resources we can. Councillor Buikema.
Will we not get more supports through the Heart and Hearth program? That
Yeah.
was my sense that
Yep.
we should
We should.
get, yeah, okay.
I do tend to agree with Councillor Patterson, though, that all we can get is the right amount, like everything we can get. Councillor Raven.
I mean, I think it's also good to think about, we are seeing some other treatment facilities come up. So there's Split Rock Healing Center, that one's Whitsett, and then there's also Red River. Yeah, that's the one. So I'm curious to see, because like the one near Terrace just opened up October. Split Rock just had their official opening, and they're doing a lot of groundwork right now, just starting to get their programming started. So we are seeing some movement. I'm not saying that we obviously don't want more, but it does look like there is some funding and stuff going in. So maybe a bit of a different approach, because also understanding that it's not necessarily all just strictly detox and facility centered. So just that healing journey is starting to be acknowledged more and more.
Okay, thank you. That said, I think we're still on board for advocating for increased complex care resources. Okay, and that might Okay, so with that though, are we talking about direct advocacy with ministers, minister meetings, and the advocacy bucket versus resolutions? Okay, that's what I thought. Youth Foundry. Mr. Schroeder.
Thank you very much, Mayor Attrell. Perhaps it could be good to have a brief move in camera as there is an update that I can provide council on this matter.
Thanks, Mr. Schroeder. And for those who may be watching, I'll just urge you to bear with us. And I'm going to move that pursuant to section 90 and 92 of the community charter, this committee of the whole meeting be closed to the public to permit discussions concerning one item under section 92B, the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government or the federal government or both, or between a provincial government or the federal government or both and a third party. Second or not needed. All in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. And we estimate about 5 minutes. Thank you. Oops. Okay, and recalling us back to order, it is 5:55. Thanks, everyone. So we are at, we were at the discussion on the Youth Foundry, and we'll just review that one when we're looking at UBCM advocacy meetings later this year. We talked about land already. Councillor Patterson raised the item of continuing to solicit or attempt to solicit increased resources for the RCMP. I don't disagree. The one comment I'd make, though, as we're talking about these, is when we review them, we may want to create the narrative that links some of the requests we have. So, you know, one of the reasons that we feel that we need increased RCMP officers is linked in part to the geography that they serve, to the complexity of the regulation that they deal with, particularly if they're on a call out of town. The longest call is to Fort Babine. So it will take hours. It generally takes 2 members. And if the matters are complex, we could have a couple of members at a service. That's okay, because the matters are complex, and that legislation and the issues that the RCMP deal with, those legislative bounds are set by other governments than us. We're required to support them. But it's part of the reason why we need increased support, that they're responding as they must, wherever the calls are, whether they're in Smithers or in neighboring communities. But that it's different than, I don't know, different than what we might imagine on an old TV cop show where they're going to go and deal with something and come back to work right away. So it's how we tell the story in that preamble that might link, you know, when we're talking about the need for additional complex care resources, why we need extra RCMP. There's a few things that we could tether in the narrative so that we are being direct and tying our asks together. And hopefully we'll have a better chance of getting the meetings and actually being heard. Okay, thanks. That's mostly for Ms. McKinley when we need to actually iron some of this out in writing. Okay. As Mr. Schroeder pointed out, it all just continues on page 17, so maybe we'll just go there. Airport slope stabilization. I don't think the need has gone away. And perhaps we can rely on staff just to update the story. And when we review this in June, we'll see where we're sitting with that. Interesting that the meeting was just denied. Lots of things were denied last year. The ESS services, Councillor Patterson, it feels to me like you were talking about this. Do you want to refresh my brain as to your perspective?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just keeping it in both buckets. So both from the northern, or pardon me, the NCLGA lens and regionally, pardon me, municipally.
If you remember, maybe just remind me of all of that, because my mind's not sort of picking it all up right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a number R14, which is on page 9 of 68. And then specific to us, I'm just recalling that our deputy fire chief had noted in one of his last reports that the trend of grants available to the community are dwindling.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Patterson. But I'm feeling like we might not be successful in view of the language that I saw today from the budget, but what's your pleasure, Council? Can we just set it aside, maybe? Yeah. Let's set this one aside, and if we've got other reasons, okay, I'm gonna just move this one to the side. Yep, no problem. Okay, so let's just set that one aside. And South Trunk Storm, oh, this related to, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I was just going to say this related to the long-term care facility. Yep.
I remembered, just thinking slow. I'm not sure what I think is the best direction for this year. So we've had some very initial conversations about what will happen with the creation of the long-term care facility. There will be needs. I'm kind of tempted to set this one aside for a couple of months as well and see where we're at, Mr. Schroeder.
Thank you, Mayor. That was going to be my recommendation is we know that the project is still moving through the development process and is working with staff in an ongoing fashion to develop a bunch of this information. So always a possibility that this is resolved at the staff level. However, should this become a issue, something we would certainly raise back up to council.
Okay, that sounds good. Is council good with that? Okay. The ones in the next box, I think we could resurface it if we need to, but we have had the update on BC Housing, the supportive housing project. We've talked about BVDH. We have a little bit more information on long-term care, the same as what Mr. Schroeder just said. We could revisit this one if we need to. And for right now, I'm of a mind of setting aside the recycling. We could revisit that in June too, if we have any sense of increased ability or direction from the entities that are responsible. This came up at the regional district as well. Not this specific part, but the the responsibility of agencies other than us to manage the recycling programs. Okay. Alrighty, I think we're through that list. Anything else from council? I do want to add, I said it earlier, but continual advocacy for the RBA. So we'll get a bit more information in the next while from the RBA steering committee, but the need for constantly reminding the province that we're grateful for the agreement and we count on a continuing agreement.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Especially in the light of what a lot of communities are facing with losses to their forest industry and mills and tax bases, is going to be really, really important that they get that money through that agreement and it keeps coming so they can actually take care of their infrastructure, because if they don't get that money, it's going to be really dire straits for them.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott. Okay. Yep, go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. If it's okay if I shift gears and go back to Northern just quickly. Yeah, okay, absolutely. So similar vein around childcare, but I would actually like to propose a specific one, and I can provide some writing around this later through to staff, because I'm going to speak just from the lens of having recently opened a small childcare facility. So recognizing I'm not an expert whatsoever, but I'd be really interested to hear from other childcare providers. So the benchmarks in which I charge families are based on provincial rates. And so they break us up into the province. So it goes Fraser Valley, Kootenay Boundary, Metro, Northern, Thompson Okanagan, and Vancouver Island. So ours, and I'll focus on my multi-age program, is 0 to 18 and 18 to 36. So let's just pick on the 18 to 36. So what I can charge is $60.47 a day per child, versus if you look at every single other region, we're roughly $20 under in comparison. And I appreciate what Councillor Raven had said about costs, because I would say, to put things in perspective, how I was able to actually attract an ECE was based on the rate of pay. So 60% of what I make goes to wages to hire and attract an ECE, because we know most of them are working cleaning houses because they can make $50 an hour doing that. And the rest of it goes to taxes. So this is not a glamorous make money. This is about putting our children first. But I think when you look at it from a business perspective, I think my eyes are wide open now as to why we potentially don't see more people within the community opening them, because you're barely covering your costs. If you want to be able to be eligible for those various program funding from the province, you have to meet their benchmarks in order to be able to say, okay, now I can offer affordable childcare to families. So I think my understanding, and again, from limited conversations with other educators, is they're just charging private rates because that's the way they can actually keep the lights on, pay their staff, and provide quality care. But on the other hand, it leaves out a lot of families who aren't able to afford quality childcare, which we know impacts many economies within our community. So just something to think about, but absolutely there's some fact checking that needs to happen there based on people and educators who've been doing this for far longer than I have. So just something to consider, that it could be a northern topic because it's based on a regional base, northern base.
Okay, thanks, Counselor Patterson. So as I heard that right now, that's for our thought process. So now I'm just going to think and speak. When I chatted with Mr. Schroeder earlier today, aware that there's a couple of folks not at this meeting today. This may come back to council at our next regular meeting, which is just next week. And perhaps we could even create a bit of space so that we don't put pressure on Ms. McKinley to have this stuff in minute form, but just to create a little speaking opportunity on the same subject matter for the counselors who aren't here. Which, and then I'm coming around to what you're saying. So there might be, if there's other information we can consider, it creates a little gap in time. So that's mostly, I think, to you, Counselor Patterson, if there's a place where information could be sourced. Unless, yeah, because I'm thinking it's a big expanse of information to ask staff to sort through. So Mr. Schroeder, your thoughts? I guess I'm trying to winnow down the research that someone might have to do.
Thank you, Mayor. This certainly would be it'd be an interesting topic to review. I think our initial start would be determining if there's been any studies that have done this type of research previously, and perhaps reaching out to some other communities who may have had some other experience with this. The topic is a little bit, I'll fully acknowledge it's a little bit foreign to us. So there would be a little bit of learning on our part that would be required.
Counselor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. One of the things I was thinking about was when we developed our childcare plan, our consultant Allison Watson was a breadth of information. I recognize that that's an additional cost, perhaps having to reach out to her. But she was somebody that came top of mind who would likely be informed on the subject matter.
Thanks, Counselor Patterson. The only thing I'm going to offer as I think about this is that we were asked to be cautious about creating new project work for staff. So it doesn't mean we can't, but we need to be cognizant of it if we're doing it. So I'm trying to figure out how we mark this as we move forward into tonight. So let's for now create some recognition of the conversation, and then it'll come back to us at some point, and then council can make a decision on whether we want to create the project, which is the work to back this up, because it seeming to me like this one might be a bit of work for staff. The way it might not be is if we're reaching out to other communities, similar to as we've asked for other resolutions, just to see if this one's alive somewhere in another community where we could tag on to the research already done, if that makes sense. So rather than our staff doing it, it might exist somewhere. Counselor Patterson.
Sorry, Your Worship, last one for me. Yes. And it actually makes me think about, will we know the decision from the province, or will we expect to know from our subsequent or follow-up application for childcare?
I don't think there's any intakes. So no, we're not going to know anything, because I'd be surprised if there is an intake this year. I think we're ready to apply if there's an application process. There has not been an intake announced. So anyway, at this point, there is no intake. Staff are ready when there's an intake. Okay, so for now, as a placeholder, are we sort of okay? Okay. Okay. So I think then we're at 5:03, unless others had topics that they wanted to introduce, new topics. So in Mr. Doer's report, he does say the following topics. And so on the second page of his report, there's a recommendation, which, or it's not a recommendation, but the potential advocacy topics. We've talked about some of them. So I'm just on the second page of his report. So the first ones came from Councillor Patterson. We've been talking a little bit about childcare and the ESS grant funding. We've talked about the library. BC Housing Emergency Response Note. Okay, I know what you're talking about. And I'm not sure what the fifth one is. Is that from you, Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Worship. I think it was just based on recognizing that Houston's going to be having some difficult conversations over the coming months. And if they felt that they needed some support from their northern neighbors, that perhaps there's a conversation that we could have as a united friendship if there's something that they wished for us to advocate for.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, and they're not the only one across our regional district. There's a couple more communities that are struggling with this as well. So this is, yeah, just an offer. Okay. Maybe I'll just make note of that. The other communities would include Fraser Lake and Vanderhoof. So if someone's willing to remind me, I'd be happy to reach out to the mayors and just see if there's something that they want. We have talked about it a bit at the RD. Okay. Then these next ones, I definitely think the support for regional airports is critical. We've talked about the exclusion or the natural background for contaminated soils. Yes. And the next one's related. So how we work with regional districts to ensure that contaminated soil can be accepted. And just for your information, I did raise this issue during the budget process at the RD, just because it does affect the budget for solid waste, but I did bring this up. And then the water level, so I support that as well, whether it's an exclusion from the federal standards or a change in the federal standards. I think this one is a huge expense for us. So however we continue to work on this, I definitely support. And the other ones, this relates to where I think Councillor Elliott was going, supporting the forestry sector, long-term care development, and I mentioned the RBA. So that's the list I have. So the things that are on this list from Mr. Dewar, I think we've spoken to and agree with. We can make some determination among council what we do to support our neighbors. And then I guess this would be, so this is the honed list from Mr. Dewar. And he might be surprised to see the lengthy list we've created without him, but and then recognizing it's going to come back to us. So we do get a look at our own list. And we've also set some things aside for June when we talk more about UBCM advocacy. And I think the piece where we need to circle back will be that, I don't know what else to call it, but the ongoing bucket. So once we've agreed to these topics, it'd be good to have the speaking points or the briefing notes so that we also determine how we're empowered to raise those issues when we can, so that we never really stop asking for the things that we think are essential for the community. Councilor Buckham.
I like the whole list. And did I hear you say we should have RBA added to it as well?
Yepper.
Okay, so that would be number 12. Anyway,
Okay.
I think it's a great list.
Okay. Ms. McKinley, anything we've missed from your perspective? Mr. Schroeder.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to confirm for 5.3, council's hoping for all 11 items plus RBA? Or was there a hope to hone in on a certain segment of these to have briefing notes readily prepared?
Sorry, I get it. I guess I was thinking we have already spoken to all of these, but you're looking for what do we want to have those standard speaking notes in those buckets for the ongoing advocacy? That's sort of the question here.
Yes, I think
Okay.
that would be the goal, to, almost like briefing notes that we regularly maintain, so that whenever members of council are attending different events, we can just provide those along.
Okay, with that sort of clarity, and I'll just get my head up here in a second, but the ones that I see sort of would be the the bottom list at this point. The top ones look like they're more specific. When I think of the airport, I think we could come up with a briefing note where we then may choose specific advocacy at the federal level. And then the other ones, the contaminated soils, the water issue, long-term care and RBA are just, these are major ones that I think we could keep that speaking note list in our back pocket, all of us. I think support for the forestry sector, well, all of these need expansion. That one probably in my mind needs the most expansion so that we're specific about what we're talking about. So that one probably needs a bit more, yeah, we need to talk about this one more. So we could do that right now. I suppose we have time. But before we do that, I'm just going to look around the table. So for having that ongoing advocacy bucket, until we agree on what that support for community forest sector looks like, can we agree to the others? The airport, contaminated soils, RDs accepting the soils, the manganese issue, long-term care, and RBA. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the forestry issue, but I just thought I'd check this time with Mr. Schroeder to see if I've missed anything else before we go on to a longer conversation.
No, Mayor, I believe you've covered all the things I would look for.
Okay, so then to support for the forestry sector, it's a pretty vague statement there, kind of a motherhood statement. Do we want, are there things that are sitting at the council table that we'd like to add as a specific comment? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Just tying it maybe perhaps to number 5 with the expansion of the neighboring communities that you talked about. Perhaps they might shed some light on specific things that their communities need in order to get specific if we were to put the resolution forward through NCLGA. But outside of that, I would say nothing specific for our community, but I'd probably defer to the expert at the table here. Look over to my fellow colleague, put him on the spot.
Yeah, I'll go to Councillor Elliott, but I do think as well that, you know, even as a non-expert, I have seen the initiatives announced recently. You know, I'll get the names wrong by the working group that came up with the report for the province. So the ministry has been gathering community experts and experts to hone things in as well. And, you know, a close-in resource we have is our colleague in the District of Vanderhoof, Councillor Frankel, who has been involved. So I'll look to Councillor Elliott, but we may want to take some of the highlights and add those to a briefing note. And then, of course, 2 or 3 of us will be attending Kofi as well, where, I mean, part of going is to advocate for our own community and our needs, and also to learn what we learned there from either the ministry or industry experts on the state of the union at that moment in time and what we might be able to do. Councillor Elliott.
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot. I agree. That's a really broad topic of discussion that means a lot of different things, a lot of different people. So, you know, like you look around each community in the north that's been struggling, there's varying reasons why mills have closed. Some of it's like harvest based, some of it's forest fire based, some of it is just the general access to timber supply. So I don't know, I was thinking outside the box here. Something we could advocate for is more engagement with First Nations groups. And that's been happening a lot more lately as well. There's some good partnerships there that are, and we can advocate for those as well, that in some of these communities that's been part of the solution, is being able to do that. I know that where I work, that's part of the solution, acquiring, keeping a good supply of timber in the future. Yeah, I mean, you may have difference of opinion about why BC's forestry is in the state it's in. Some may blame American tariffs, some may blame stumpage rate, some may blame, again, the acquisition or availability of the timber, which is one of the big ones. But again, around this table, how do you decipher what reasons that mills can't acquire timber? You may get 6 different stories from 6 different people. So I think for me, advocating for healthy forests that are sustainable and advocating for good First Nations partnerships with companies and First Nations groups is a big one. I think, yeah, the support, yeah, I support the forestry sector, great, but it's very broad and very nuanced. I think our mayor talks a lot about keeping the timber in our area and not letting it go to other places. And of course, there's always arguments for that as well, right? So, and I agree, like trucking it 500-600 kilometers away may not be the best management of that resource. Also just plugging that it's a renewable resource as well, that people, maybe a lot of people in the public don't understand. I think our influence can go a long way, and maybe propping up the future of forestry in BC and just how the province has built on that in the past. So I'm not an expert. I'm passionate about it, but I'm not an expert, I don't think, but I think it supports our communities and has for a long time. And when I see communities struggling to pay their bills and to keep their infrastructure in good shape because they don't have the tax base, that's concerning to me.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott. Yeah, I think, as we consider what might be important to this municipality and the region, and you touched on a couple of them, one is partnerships. One is, good management and good looking after the resources. You're right, they're renewable, but they're not renewable in 10 or 15 years. They're renewable over 80 to 100 years. That does require long-term vision. And, different people will have different opinions, but I do think using the resources to support the community in the region, that speaks to me. But these are things we may want to tease out amongst ourselves. So some of this come back. So I do think benefit to the locale, to the region, and that linkage to our neighboring First Nations makes sense. But, and the word is becoming used more and more, and it's going back to a pertinency. I'm not making this stuff up. I hear it in meetings. So where that lands, who knows? It does have a different resonance throughout the sector. But, as we sit at this table, what matters, I think, is that the resources in our region, you can draw that boundary wherever you like, benefit the region, the people, the community, and the sub-businesses. So there's, we have the major licensees and we have all the forestry contractors, and they're the folks that live here, the employees that the licensee hires and the contractors and their staff. Those are the folks that are looking to us to support the sector, in addition, to beyond. But when we look to our neighbor directly to the east, as Councillor Patterson, like, that matters. It's not just the money, it's the culture of a community. It's, a community that described itself, at least in part, a certain way, and that's falling apart. And I think we can feel that as, a potential threat in this community. And we are fortunate, Councillor Elliott talked about it, the partnerships and the fact that, there is still a timber supply, but things change in a heartbeat with wildfires as well. So, so creating whatever that support for the forestry sector, and I think I would be comfortable as a discussion point is to start with how do we support our local community and the forestry sector within our community. We might build out a story from that. And I'm also, content to support those bundles of experts that create these documents that may create a different forestry vision for the province. It's going to recognize differences throughout the province, but as a starting point, definitely supporting the local employees, the industry. And I guess this, we're talking about the mill here, but the other business aside from the forestry contractors is Drax. That plays a role too. So how do we put all that in? Enough of a ramble. Hopefully some of that made sense to the poor people keeping notes. But again, it'll come back so council can review and see if it's something we agree to. Okay. Anything else? Mr. Schroeder?
That's everything on our list, but I know that there was something that we put offside to.
Yep.
Perfect.
So if this is done, then I think one more time, that piece of paper. All your notes. Okay, and perhaps the last time for this evening, I will move that pursuant to section 90 and 92 of the community charter, this committee of the whole meeting be closed to the public to permit discussions concerning one item under section 92B, consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government or the federal government or both, or between a provincial government or the federal government or both and a third party. No seconder needed. All in favor? Any opposed? And that's carried.
Good evening, and to those members that were joining us online from the public. We have adjourned the meeting, and we are thankful for you participating in this evening's meeting virtually.